And I liked Don Brown. I thought I liked old grizzled coaches. I liked watching. Well, prior to COVID, I liked watching the press conferences on YouTube, and I liked sitting and listening to Don, talk about the TOEFLs and his Viper defense and how the defense is improving and those kinds of things. And I just like listening to him talk his X's and O's and those kinds of things. But as we all know, in the COVID-19 shortened season, it was a brutal season for the defense. And that's what in large part led to Don and Jimbo parting ways. And Jim, what was surprising about it was Jim, as we know, Jim was fiercely loyal to his assistants. But after what happened, there was just, I think a parting of ways was the best way to go. And also his defense, while it did well against lesser opponents, lesser talented opponents, and opponents with fewer athletes, his defense did well against those teams, but against teams that solved it, as I'll read for you in a second, and against the Ohio State University, his defense got obliterated. I have another comment here. I'm going to read it really quickly. The defense, as I thought about this, I thought back to the 2018 Ohio State game, or the Revenge Tour game. And that game, Michigan was on its quote-unquote revenge tour. It lost the Notre Dame game at the beginning of that season, and the team seemed to have turned things around, and they were riding a lot of momentum going into that matchup in Columbus. And Ohio State had some struggles leading up to that matchup in Columbus. And I think there was a surprising Purdue loss that knocked the Buckeyes back on their heels. And there was according to John U. Bacon's book, Overtime, the Buckeyes escaped Maryland the weekend before the Revenge Tour game. So going back to that season, all signs were pointing towards Michigan winning that game. Now, of course, we know what happened. But my feeling is that the 2016 Ohio State game and the 2018 Ohio State game were probably the two winnable games for Jim Harbaugh, and those are probably the biggest two games of his tenure. We know what happened in 2016. It was close, went down to the wire. But the 2018 game, I think, was a head scratcher for a bunch of us. But then again, when you go back and look at what happened, it wasn't so much of a head scratcher. I'm going to read a page. I'm just about done with this book, guys, but I'm going to read a page from 2 or 3 pages from Overtime, specifically what John U. Bacon wrote about the Ohio State game, because I think it feeds well into the article that I want to focus on for this live stream. So this reads as follows. Some thought it would be a battle, others a Michigan blowout, but no one predicted what happened. While Michigan's offense had to settle for field goals, the Buckeyes employed the same attack that Northwestern and Indiana had used, slant routes and crossing patterns, to build a daunting 21-6 lead with 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the first half. So with the way the defense had played for most of that season, to see Ohio State come out and move the ball with ease the way they did that day, as a Michigan fan, you were sitting there like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, how is this happening? But as John U. Bacon just stated, Northwestern and Indiana had laid the blueprint for shredding Don Brown's defense prior to that game. And as we saw, Ohio State had the quarterback who could zip the ball if he had time. Dwayne Haskins. I thought Dwayne Haskins was better than J.T. Barrett in terms of being a pocket passer. So if Dwayne Haskins had time, he had the arm, he had the touch, and Ohio State had the speed outside with Chris Olave and those guys. Okay, the Wolverines, accustomed to staying cool under pressure, countered with a 79-yard drive to cut the lead to 21-13, close enough to take to the locker room and regroup. Then, a gift. Buckeyes fumbled the following kickoff on the 9-yard line. Patterson hit a wide open Chris Evans, and suddenly the score was 21-19. Yeah, that whole turn of events kind of gave you new life. You're like, okay, now we're only down 21-19. We're not going to get blown out. We're still in this game. After Michigan attempted an ill-advised two-point conversion and failed, the Buckeyes got the ball on their 25-yard line with only 41 seconds left. I remember watching that game and thinking, why are they going for 2 points? I would have gone with the extra point to put us down 21-20, if just for morale. But not getting the 2-point conversion, I think that was a step back mentally for a fragile team who was unexpectedly getting punched in the mouth by Ohio State. 3 Michigan penalties and 1 33-yard pass later, the Buckeyes were down to Michigan's 3-yard line. On 2nd and goal from the 2, Haskins ran the option to the right side and tossed the ball to Tate Martell, who looked like he had plenty of space to score. But Noah Furbush, who had returned to beat the Buckeyes, stepped up to throw everything he had to stop Martell cold with technical perfection and 5 years of rage. The Buckeyes had to settle for a field goal and a 24-19 halftime lead. You think about a guy making a play at a tough moment in the game, John Jansen. You just backed us down 70 yards in less than a minute, but I'm not going to give you this last yard. I refuse. I'm going to fight you for every inch. That defines Noah Furbush as a player, as a leader on his team, and the man that he is. And I think Noah Furbush was an Ohio kid, though maybe not one of the highly recruited ones that Ohio State gets or that Ohio State is keeping these days. Furbush's 4-point save seemed like the kind of play that might be remembered for a long time. Since 1970, 4 points would have changed the outcome of 15 Michigan-Ohio State games, almost a third. The Wolverines were right there. But Winovich had a feeling Indiana set the template to beat our defense. Winovich told me, just as Brown had warned them. But the Buckeyes took it farther because they have better athletes than Indiana. Ohio State came in knowing the crossing routes would be a severe problem for us, and they went up-tempo more than any team we faced. Makes things far more confusing and harder to adjust to for a defense. Winovich could pinpoint the moment when he knew they were in trouble. I got a tackle for a loss and did the cross-armed signal. You're not going there, but they got back to the line of scrimmage so fast, ready to run their next play. It was almost like I hadn't made a play at all. No time to celebrate. It wasn't like we didn't adjust. A big misconception was that we just ran man-to-man coverage the whole game. But when we switched to one kind of zone, then another, they were ready for all of that too. And they were just faster than us. At halftime, it was close, but you already got the feeling we were in trouble. Those guys had us figured out. They knew us. That thought was prevalent throughout the game. At no point, at no time did I feel like we had momentum. The Wolverines still trailed by only 8 points midway through the third quarter when Zach Gentry dropped a first down pass at midfield. On the following punt, the Buckeyes blocked it, I remember that, and ran it back for a touchdown, 34-19. 3 plays later, Patterson threw an interception that the Buckeyes quickly converted to another touchdown for a 41-19 lead en route to a 62-39 thrashing. The most any opponent had ever scored in regulation in 140 years of Michigan football. But, when I look at the score and when I read this passage and when I thought about it, 39 points for that Michigan offense was a good output. But as I just read, that Ohio State team, they had the defense solved. They knew that Northwestern and Indiana had shown the vulnerability of that defense the previous week, and then probably 7 weeks earlier, because I think Northwestern was the first Big Ten game for Michigan that season, and Ohio State had the athletes, and you could just see that our defense couldn't stop those guys. Olave was running around pretty easily, and I can't think of the rest of the receivers, but I just remember Brandon Watson in particular getting abused. And I just remember thinking, okay, why doesn't Don change the defense? Why are these guys running free? Part of it was the scheme. Part of it was the athletes. And it was a bit of a bloodbath. And so, but that Buffalo Wild Wings on Niagara Falls Boulevard is also the official Western New York Buckeyes game watch location. So you can only imagine for most of that game, as a Michigan fan, you're hearing Schloopy, that Schloopy song that the Ohio State fans sing. And I think the Ohio State fans, someone brought in a big Brutus the Buckeye cutout. And, some of them, they were nice, but they kind of came over and rubbed it in. But it was, that was a tough day, a tough outing. That may be frustrating for Michigan fans who are out on Brown and his old school approach, but consider Michigan's former defense a hammer, a useful tool when you want to bludgeon opponents with a myriad of blitzes and make life difficult for opposing quarterbacks. So remember, that worked against some programs, but not against the elite programs, like our friends down south in Columbus. Perhaps the most recent peak of this approach was a 4-game span in 2018 against Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, and Rutgers, in which Michigan allowed a combined 5 offensive touchdowns. Now, let's look at those 4 teams. So Wisconsin, when we played Wisconsin down at our house, aside from this season, the Wisconsin game, the home team usually wins the Wisconsin game regarding Michigan versus Wisconsin. This season, it didn't go that way. That Michigan State game, that Michigan State team in 2018, hey, I was at that game. I have that program somewhere, but I was at that game up in East Lansing. that Michigan State game, that Michigan State team was offensively challenged. So Brian Lewerke, I think, was injured that year, and he wasn't much of a threat. And so that game was probably a little bit defensive. Penn State, Saquon Barkley went pro. So we didn't see the same Penn State team that blew us out in Happy Valley the previous season. And then the last team on that 4-game stretch before Michigan played Indiana was Rutgers. So that stretch, while Don's defense looked good, was arguably a little bit deceptive, in my opinion.